let me show you a little bit around KnowUML's a few of the advanced features along here. And they're not super advanced, but just some of the menus so you can see what they mean if you haven't played with them yourself so far. So the configuration menu has a couple different options here. The first is using different styled lines or using multiple colors to be able to see things a little bit better. And I'll show you an example of that here in a second. But before I leave that, I want to show you that here are all the different types of samples that are out there. So let's just say when you're doing with use case diagrams, you did randomly select from the list, but you really, really, really want to see this exploring governments one. Well, you can uncheck all the rest of them here. Or you can check everything inside of here if you remove all or add all. And it will, and then you can say, I want to definitely do this one. And so then the next time you generate a use case diagram, it's going to be, again, notice I restarted it. Sometimes it takes a second to generate these. Oh, look at that. I ran into a problem. So I'll be probably fixing this bug and doing it out there. But oh yes, so I ran out of styles. So yes, an interesting problem. Um, so what I'm going to do, huh, we do that again. It's an interesting bug. I'll have to go off and look at it. But I think the problem here is because I'm on level 4 and I'm just trying to generate a huge, massive problem here. That's again another great thing about running in Eclipse is you can see the errors and you can let me know if something like this comes up. But let me go back to here and let me change my level back down to 3. So on use cases, the level 4 can be really, really complicated. So let me go back down to 3 and hopefully this cleans it up. Yes, there you go. So here's a pretty complicated example of a use case that has a bunch of packages, a bunch of use cases, and a bunch of actors as well. So this is kind of hard to read, right? All these black lines kind of blend together. And so that's where under configuration you can say use styled lines and or colored lines. And then you can go back to the diagram and it will redraw that with a little bit of color. Now, it doesn't necessarily make it perfect, but again, you're allowed to make mistakes. But it gives me some idea. So justice the piece here clearly can go to sign treaties, and looks like they go to levy tariffs, and looks like they go to regulate commerce, and there's a bunch of things there. So if you really have a hard time reading, just dial down the complexity. The great thing about the more complicated diagrams is it lets you train your eyes towards more complicated diagrams. Use cases, I get the idea. I probably wouldn't draw with so much overlapping stuff here. This isn't a great diagram, but again, it's randomly generated. But I can generate it again as a slightly lower one, and it just means there's fewer stuff. I might have to do 2 or 3 diagrams of answering the questions to get there, but time-wise, I either spend a whole bunch of time parsing out which lines go where, or in this case, I just do it 2 or 3 times to get the same numbers. Again, it's not the number of diagrams, it's the things you're counting on the diagrams that is important. And so that's where I really want you to play with and see a lot of these and be able to pull them together. Now, the lines don't always mean anything. So for example, if I go to a sequence diagram right now, this doesn't have colored or styled lines because sequence diagrams already have a very specific meaning of the style, and they're much less likely to overlap. This probably will never overlap, even for very, very complicated diagrams. So the configuration item for using styled and colored lines, you never have to set this. In some of the diagrams, it will never show up for, and so you won't have to worry about it. But it is helpful in some of the other diagrams that do come up. But I want you to be aware of this just in case it helps you if you need to differentiate the lines. Be aware, though, in UML, most of the time those styles are actually inappropriate. Those styles are not not illegal per se, but they can be confusing because they have specific meanings, as we saw in the sequence diagram that we started working here. This dotted line has a very different meaning than this direct line, and if you did a dotted line in the wrong case, it'd be confusing for people. All right, so that's your configuration menu. As I said, we'd already mentioned the levels, so you can set this at any level. And again, there's no bonus or there's no punishment for working at higher or lower levels. So if you do a level 4 one, it just means you're practicing something that is very rich and complicated. But if you do 5 level 1s and count the points, you're not getting any fewer points than if you do level 4 ones. So I'll leave it to you to decide, what works well for you within these levels. As far as the diagrams go, again, right now we've only looked at the read, but these all pretty much work the same. So if I look at an inheritance diagram, looks like a class diagram, but it has this notion of inheritance. So we've seen examples of each of them right now. Coding we'll come back to in another video. The other thing I wanted to point out, we talked about the help menu as well, but is this idea of the ledger. So when it comes time for you to share your work, when you go to the achievements and it says open the file location of the ledger, that's going to open up the folder where your KnowUML is running in. Basically, the folder where that is where your configuration file and your ledger file come in. So notice here that this is the 13456, which is the student ID I typed in when I first logged in. This will be your student ID that shows up on this file name. And the config file is just a text file that helps customize some stuff. So you can see my first name, my last name, my student ID. And then it also shows the level I've selected. So the next time I start the tool, I keep working at the same level. There's some internal ID stuff that helps keep track of the diagrams that get created. You don't have to worry about those. It actually keeps track of your badges here, but you editing this only fools yourself. It doesn't send this file when you get credit for it. So if I go through and say, oh, well, use case package, I'm going to make that 400, and then I'm done, right? Well, it'll show done on your side. It's not fooled because the ledger file gets counted up based off the work you've done. But it also here shows the ones you've chosen. So what you're working on. You don't ever need to open that file. I just want to show you a little bit about how code works and how things get stored in the backend. There's a file someplace. You put it in. In this case, I made it a clear text file. But the ledger file is not. The ledger keeps track of the diagram that's created and what you answered for the questions and code you wrote and all that sort of stuff. And this one is actually hashed data, which means instead of having big long text that's human readable, we make it ones and zeros, and the text file reads it as text, but this isn't really text. Inside of here is all the different diagrams you drew and all the different, well, I've drawn it here at this point, and all the different answers of questions I put in and such. And so this hashed file is all the work you've seen in all the videos so far, and it's only 43K. Isn't that great? And so this gets uploaded, and this is what gets graded. So most likely, this gets uploaded to some online tool, and we'll just see a video for that and separately for for the class and how yours gets graded. But I want you to see where all these different menu items are independently and kind of have a sense of what they mean.